The transport shuttle descended through the amber clouds of Terran Colony 7, its sleek Arkanni design cutting through the atmosphere like a blade through silk. Inside the passenger compartment, Lord Kael'Theron sat motionless, his tall frame rigid against the acceleration seat. His silver-blue skin caught the dying light filtering through the viewport, and his three-fingered hands rested on his knees with practiced nobility. 7 cycles. 7 rotations around the galactic core since he had last set foot on this insignificant farming world. The other passengers gave him a wide berth. Even in civilian clothing, the sharp angles of his face and the luminescent patterns that traced his temples marked him as Arkanni nobility. His kind did not travel to backwater agricultural colonies. His kind commanded fleets, negotiated treaties, shaped the destiny of 100 worlds. And yet, here he was. The shuttle's pilot, a stocky human with weathered hands, glanced back nervously. "My lord, we'll be landing at the primary depot in approximately 12 minutes. Will you be requiring ground transport to the administrative center?" "No!" Kael'Theron's voice carried the harmonic undertone characteristic of his species, making even simple words sound like a proclamation. "Take me to the northern farmsteads. Sector 9. The pilot's eyebrows rose. "Sector 9, sir? That's mostly independent holdings. Small operations. Are you certain that—" "I did not ask for your commentary. I gave you a destination." "Yes, my lord." "Of course, my lord." The shuttle banked, changing course. Through the viewport, Kael'Theron watched the landscape shift below. The colony had grown since his last visit, but not by much. Prefabricated structures clustered around landing pads. Fields of hybrid crops stretched in geometric patterns, their colors slightly wrong for earth plants, adapted to the local soil chemistry and the orange-tinted sunlight of this system's star. Primitive, humble, forgotten by the greater galaxy. He had told himself he would never return. The memories came unbidden. 7 cycles ago, he had been young for an Arkanni, barely into his 2nd century. The Empire had sent him here on a diplomatic assignment, a minor posting meant to teach him humility before he assumed his full responsibilities. A punishment, really, for speaking too boldly in the Grand Council about expanding human rights within Imperial space. They had wanted to show him the reality of humanity, to let him see how these short-lived creatures scraped out their existence on the margins of civilization, farming worlds that more advanced species found beneath their notice. Instead, he had met Elara. The shuttle touched down on a gravel pad at the edge of a sprawling farm. Through the viewport, Kael'Theron could see the familiar sight of the main house, a sturdy structure built from local stone and imported composite panels. Solar collectors lined the roof. Agricultural drones sat dormant in their charging stations. A few pieces of heavy equipment rested near a barn-like structure. And there, in the field beyond, a figure straightened from her work. Even at this distance, even after 7 cycles, he recognized her immediately. The way she moved, the set of her shoulders, the cascade of dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. Elara Chen. His hands tightened on his knees. The pilot initiated the landing sequence. "We're down, my lord. Will you be requiring the shuttle to wait?" "Yes. Stand by for my return." "How long should I—" "Stand by." Kael'Theron rose and moved to the exit hatch. The hydraulics hissed as the door lowered into a ramp. The air that rushed in carried the scent of turned earth and growing things, undercut by something sharp and mineral he had never quite identified. Not earth smells, not Arkanni smells, something uniquely this world's own. He descended the ramp. Elara had stopped working entirely now. She stood perhaps 50 meters away, one hand shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, the other hanging at her side. She wore practical work clothes, canvas pants, and a faded shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Dirt smudged her forearms. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Elara set down the tool she had been holding, some kind of soil sampler, and began walking toward him. Her pace was steady, unhurried, not running to meet him, not fleeing, simply approaching with the same calm determination he remembered. When she was close enough to speak without shouting, she stopped. "Kael." Her voice was exactly as he remembered. Warm, with a slight rasp from years of breathing this planet's dry air. No title, no formality, just his name, spoken as though 7 cycles were 7 days. "Elara." He inclined his head in the gesture of greeting his people used between equals. "You look well. You look exactly the same." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Arkanni don't age much in 7 years, do they?" "Cycles," he corrected automatically. 7 cycles. And no, we do not. "Right, cycles." She wiped her hands on her pants, a gesture he recognized as nervous habit. What brings you back to Colony 7? I heard you made High Diplomatic Envoy. Congratulations. That's a long way from the junior attaché who used to help me repair irrigation lines. I need to speak with you. He glanced toward the house. Privately. Something shifted in her expression. The easy facade cracked just slightly, revealing a flicker of what might have been fear or perhaps resignation. I see. Well, come on then. We can talk inside. She turned and started walking toward the house without waiting to see if he would follow. That was like her too. Elara Chen did not wait on the convenience of nobility. He followed. The house was much as he remembered, though clearly maintained and improved over the years. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with efficient use of space typical of frontier homesteads. A table that had once been empty now held school pads and drawing tablets. Children's drawings covered one section of wall, colorful crayon depictions of the farm, of strange alien animals from picture books, of stick figures beneath enormous suns. Kael'Theron stopped walking. You've been teaching? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. What? Elara followed his gaze. Oh. No, those are... She paused, and when she continued, her voice was quieter. Those are Mira's. Mira. Yes. A child of the colony? No, Kael. Elara moved to the kitchen counter and began preparing tea with precise, controlled movements. My child. Our child. The words hung in the air like a detonation in vacuum, their silence more profound than any sound. Kael'Theron's analytical mind, trained in diplomacy and strategic thinking, immediately began cataloging impossibilities. Arkanni and humans were genetically incompatible. Decades of medical research had confirmed it. The biological gulf between their species was simply too vast. Relationships between humans and Arkanni were not forbidden because of bigotry, but because they were fundamentally sterile, safe in their futility. That's impossible, he said. I know what the science says. Elara's hands remained steady as she poured boiling water over tea leaves. I was there for the awkward medical briefings too, remember? Before anything happened. They were very clear, very thorough. No biological risk of pregnancy between species. That's what they told us. Then explain. She's 6 years old, Kyle. 6 Earth years, which is about 6.5 of your cycles. She's healthy, brilliant, and yes, absolutely impossible. Elara turned to face him, and now he could see the steel in her eyes that he had always admired. And she's upstairs sleeping right now because she has a fever and needs her rest, so I need you to keep your voice down. He could barely process the information. You're telling me that we have a daughter, a hybrid child, something that every xenobiologist in the Empire says cannot exist. I'm telling you exactly that. And in 7 cycles, you never sent word, never contacted me, never informed me that... Informed you? Elara's voice rose slightly before she caught herself and lowered it again. Kael, you left. You completed your assignment and returned to your life on Arkanni Prime. You sent one message, very polite, very formal, explaining that your duties required your full attention and that while you valued our time together, you had obligations to your house and your people. What exactly was I supposed to do? Send a message through official channels? Dear High Diplomatic Envoy, remember that human you slept with 7 cycles ago? Surprise. I deserved to know. Maybe you did. Elara's shoulders sagged slightly. But by the time I realized what was happening, you were already gone. And then when she was born and I saw what she was... Kael, do you understand what they would do if they knew? The Empire? Your precious Grand Council? They would take her. They would study her. She would become a political crisis, a scientific curiosity, a threat to your precious genetic purity laws. Our laws exist for reasons... Your laws exist because your people are terrified of anything they can't control. The accusation stung because it carried truth. Kael'Theron had spent 7 cycles navigating the labyrinthine politics of the Arkanni Empire. He knew exactly what his people feared: contamination, dilution, the loss of the purity that made them superior. A hybrid child would be viewed as an abomination by the conservatives, a security threat by the military, and an impossible anomaly by the scientific establishment. They would never let her live freely. I want to see her, he said quietly. Elara studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied some requirement, because she nodded slowly. All right. But Kael, I need you to understand something first. She doesn't know about you. She knows her father was Arkanni, and that he had to leave. She's asked questions, and I've answered them as honestly as I could. But she doesn't know your name, your title, or anything that could identify you. I did that to protect her, and to protect you. I understand. Do you? Because if you're going to walk up those stairs and meet her, you need to be ready for what that means. She's not an idea or a diplomatic problem. She's a little girl who is scared right now because she's sick, and her body is changing in ways she doesn't understand. Changing how? Elara's expression became haunted. She's developing your people's abilities, the telepathic sensitivity, the resonance patterns. Her emotions sometimes affect electronic equipment. Last week, she had a nightmare, and half the farm's systems went haywire. She's 6 years old and she's terrified that she's turning into a monster. Kael'Theron felt something twist in his chest, an emotion he could not immediately name. His people developed their neural electric abilities during adolescence, a carefully monitored process guided by trainers and family. For a child to experience it without context, without support. "Take me to her," he said. Elara nodded and led him to a narrow staircase. The upper floor held 3 rooms. She stopped at a closed door decorated with more crayon drawings and took a breath. She might be asleep. "And Kael, whatever happens, whatever you decide after this, just remember that she didn't ask for any of this. She didn't choose to be impossible." Then she opened the door. The room was small but carefully arranged. Books lined makeshift shelves. Educational posters covered the walls, teaching basic algebra and stellar cartography. A child's desk held a tablet displaying a half-finished essay on colonial farming techniques. And in the bed, beneath blankets decorated with cartoon representations of various alien species, lay the most impossible thing Kael'Theron had ever seen. She was small, as human children were at this age. Her skin was several shades darker than his, closer to Elara's olive-tan complexion, but with an undertone that caught the light in ways human skin did not. Her hair was dark like her mother's, but thicker, with a texture somewhere between human and Arkanni. Her face was delicate, with Elara's bone structure softened by something else, something that made her features seem almost ethereal. And on her temples, just barely visible, were the faintest traces of luminescent patterns. She was beautiful. She was impossible. She was his daughter. As if sensing their presence, the child stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, and Kael'Theron saw that they were a deep brown, human in color, but with an inner ring of silver that flickered as she focused. "Mama?" Her voice was rough with sleep and fever. "Who's that?" Elara moved to the bedside immediately, her hand finding her daughter's forehead. "How are you feeling, honey?" "Hot, tired. The buzzing is back." Mira's eyes never left Kael'Theron. "Is he one of the Arkanni? Like in the pictures?" "Yes, sweetheart. This is an old friend. His name is Kael." "Kael." Mira tested the name, her voice giving it the same harmonic undertone that his own carried. An unconscious mimicry or something deeper? "You have the marks on your head like me. Does yours hurt sometimes too?" Before he could respond, Elara spoke. "Mira, honey, you need to rest. We can talk later." "No." Kael'Theron moved closer, drawn by something he could not resist. He knelt beside the bed so he was at the child's eye level. "No, it's all right. And yes, Mira, sometimes they hurt, especially when you're young and still learning to control them." "Really?" Hope flickered in those strange, beautiful eyes. "Mama said that might be why, but she didn't know for sure. She's not Arkanni. She doesn't have them. I can help," Kael'Theron heard himself say. "If you would like, I can show you how to make the buzzing stop, how to make the marks feel better. Can you stay?" The question was so simple, so direct, the way only a child could ask. "Just for a little while? Until I feel better?" He looked up at Elara and saw in her face all the fear and hope and desperate love of a mother who had carried this secret alone for 6 years. She gave the slightest nod. "Yes," Kael'Theron said, returning his attention to his daughter. "I can stay for a while." Mira smiled, and the luminescent patterns on her temples flickered with something that might have been joy. "Good. I have lots of questions. Mama says I always have too many questions. Do you know about the Grand Fleet and the crystal cities on Arkanni Prime? And why some ships can fold space but others can't? And—" "Mira," Elara's voice was gentle but firm. "Rest first, questions later." "Okay, Mama." The child's eyes were already drifting closed again. "But he'll be here when I wake up, right?" Kael'Theron looked at this impossible child, this beautiful secret, this daughter he had never known existed. "Yes," he said, and felt the weight of that promise settle over him like a mantle. "I'll be here." As Mira slipped back into fevered sleep, Elara gestured for Kael'Theron to follow her back downstairs. They descended in silence, and it was not until they were back in the main room that either of them spoke. "Now you see," Elara said quietly. Now you understand why I never told you. Why I could never tell you." Kael'Theron moved to the window and stared out at the amber sky. His shuttle waited on the landing pad, its pilot surely wondering what diplomatic business could take so long at a simple farm. That shuttle could take him back to the depot, back to his ship, back to Arkanni Prime and his responsibilities. 7 cycles ago, he had left because duty demanded it. But duty had never looked like this. "She will need training," he said finally. "Proper training. The neural electric development in Arkanni children is carefully guided. Without proper instruction, she could hurt herself, or others. I know, I've been researching, trying to help, but there's only so much information available to civilians, and nothing about hybrid children because we're not supposed to exist." "No, you're not." He turned to face her. "Elara, you need to understand what this means. If the Empire discovers her existence, they will not simply study her. She represents a threat to centuries of biological doctrine. There are factions who would see her as an evolutionary miracle, and there are factions who would see her as a contamination that must be eliminated, and they can't find out. It may already be too late." He gestured to the shuttle visible through the window. "I came here on an Imperial vessel. I filed a flight plan. My presence on this world is a matter of record." Elara's face paled. "Why did you come back, Kael? After all this time, why now?" He had asked himself the same question during the long journey from Arkanni Prime. The official reason was a diplomatic survey, a review of human colonies to assess integration progress. The real reason was something he had barely admitted to himself. "I never forgot you," he said simply. 7 cycles, dozens of diplomatic functions, proposals from suitable Arkanni mates of appropriate lineage, and none of it mattered because I never forgot the human woman who taught me that nobility means nothing if you cannot dig your hands into the soil and grow something real. Elara's eyes glistened. "That's a very pretty speech, but it doesn't change anything. You're still High Diplomatic Envoy. I'm still a farmer on a backwater colony. And now we have a daughter who shouldn't exist, and enemies who would destroy her if they knew. Then we don't let them know. How? You said yourself that your presence here is recorded. What happens when someone asks questions? What happens when they want to know why Lord Kael'Theron spent hours at an insignificant farm?" He considered the problem with the same analytical precision he brought to treaty negotiations. Then, slowly, an idea began to form. Dangerous, complicated, but possible. "I came here on a diplomatic survey," he said slowly, "to assess the colony's integration and resource management. It would be entirely reasonable for me to inspect local farms, meet with agricultural administrators, review production metrics. No one would question that. You want to hide in plain sight. More than that, I want to establish a legal pretext for my continued interest in this farm specifically. If I recommend Colony 7 for increased Imperial investment, if I single out this farmstead as an example of effective human-Arkanni cooperation, then my presence here becomes not just acceptable, but expected." Elara stared at him. "You want to use your position to protect her. I want to use everything I have to protect her. Both of you." He moved closer. "But Elara, you need to understand what you're asking. If I do this, if I commit to this course, I am risking everything. My position, my house's reputation, potentially my life. The moment anyone discovers the truth, I become complicit in concealing an illegal hybrid, and the penalties for that are severe. Then don't." She said it softly but firmly. "Don't risk everything, Kael. You have a good life, important work. You can walk away right now and no one needs to know. I've managed for 6 years. I can keep managing. Can you?" He gestured toward the stairs. "She's developing abilities that you cannot guide, that no human can guide. What happens during her next growth phase? What happens when her telepathic sensitivity increases and she starts picking up thoughts from everyone around her? What happens when the colonial authorities notice anomalies in her medical scans? I'll figure something out. I always do. You should not have to." The words came out with more force than he intended. "You should not have had to bear this alone. And He stopped, struggling with emotions that Arkanni were trained to master from birth. "I abandoned you. I told myself I was honoring my duty, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what I felt for you. Afraid of what it meant to care so deeply for someone so different from myself. And in my cowardice, I left you to face this impossible situation alone." Elara's expression softened. "You didn't know. Because I never asked. Because I never checked. Because I took the easy path and told myself it was the right one." He reached out hesitantly, and when she did not pull away, he took her hand in his. The touch sent a jolt through him, a reminder of everything he had tried to forget. Let me help. Let me do what I should have done 7 cycles ago. Let me be here. She looked down at their joined hands, human and Arkanni, dark skin against silver blue. So different, so impossible, and yet fitting together as if they had never been apart. She needs you, Elara said quietly. Whatever my pride says, whatever the risk, she needs someone who understands what's happening to her. Someone who can teach her. And her voice broke slightly. And maybe I need you too. Because I'm so tired, Kael. So tired of being afraid every moment that someone will notice her eyes, or her abilities, or the way she makes electronics behave strangely when she's upset. I'm tired of lying to the neighbors about why I homeschool her. I'm tired of living in constant fear that the next medical check will reveal something I can't explain away. Then let me share that burden. She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw the woman he had fallen in love with 7 cycles ago. Stubborn, brave, impossibly kind. You promise? You promise you won't leave again? Because I can handle a lot, Kael, but I can't handle watching you walk away twice, and I won't let Mira go through that either. I promise, on my house name, on my honor, on everything I am. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm staying, for as long as it takes, for as long as you'll have me. She smiled then, that warm smile he had seen only in his memories for 7 cycles. Then I guess you'd better go tell your pilot he's going to be here a while. Considerably longer than a while. I'll need to establish a permanent diplomatic presence, a formal liaison position. It will take some political maneuvering, but I believe I can make it work. A diplomatic mission, on a farming colony. Elara laughed, and there was a note of hysteria in it. The galaxy really has gone insane. No, Kael'Theron pulled her closer, and she did not resist. The galaxy is exactly as it has always been. We are the ones who are impossible. We are the ones who should not exist, and yet here we are. She rested her head against his chest, and he marveled at how perfectly she still fit there. Here we are, she echoed. One stubborn farmer, one wayward diplomat, and one absolutely impossible little girl. Our impossible little girl. From upstairs came a faint sound. Not quite a cry, but a murmur of discomfort. Mira, stirring in her fever dreams. Elara pulled back. I should check on her. We should check on her, Kael'Theron corrected. I meant what I said. I'm here now. And I'm not leaving. They climbed the stairs together, and when they entered Mira's room, they found her tossing in the tangled blankets. The luminescent patterns on her temples flickered erratically, and small static discharges danced across the tablet on her desk. Nightmare, Elara whispered. She's been having them more often. Kael'Theron moved to the bedside and gently placed his hand on Mira's forehead. She was burning with fever, but underneath that he could feel something else. The chaotic pulse of untrained neural electric energy, desperate for guidance and finding none. He closed his eyes and reached out with his own abilities, something Arkanni learned to do as adolescents, but that he had perfected over decades. The telepathic touch was gentle, barely more than a whisper against Mira's unconscious mind. He did not invade her thoughts or force his presence. Instead, he simply offered a pattern, a rhythm, the steady, controlled pulse of a trained mind showing an untrained one how to find stillness. Slowly, Mira's thrashing ceased. The flickering patterns on her temples steadied. The static discharges faded. Her breathing deepened into true, restful sleep. Elara stared at him with wonder. I've never seen her settle that fast. What did you do? Just showed her a pattern to follow. It's the first thing Arkanni trainers do with young children when their abilities begin to manifest. A mental anchor. He kept his hand on Mira's forehead, maintaining the gentle connection. She's incredibly strong, Elara. Stronger than most pure Arkanni children I've trained with. If she had proper instruction, she will. Elara moved to stand beside him. You'll teach her, won't you? Every day. Everything I know. Everything she needs to survive in a galaxy that will fear what she represents. He looked down at his daughter, this impossible miracle sleeping peacefully now. And when she's strong enough, when she's ready, we'll show the Empire that their precious biological laws are as fragile as their prejudices. That's treason talk, Lord Kael'Theron. Perhaps. Or perhaps it's simply the truth they've been avoiding for centuries. He withdrew his hand slowly, making sure Mira remained sleeping peacefully. Our people like to believe we are superior because of our genetic purity. But looking at her, I see something that terrifies them. What's that? Evidence that we were never as superior as we believed. That humanity has something we do not. An adaptability. a resilience, a willingness to become something new rather than clinging to what we were. He turned to face Elara fully. She's not weaker than either of us. She's stronger than both of us, and that's what they'll never forgive. Elara took his hand again. Then we keep her safe until she's strong enough to keep herself safe. Agreed. They stood together in the quiet room, watching their daughter sleep. Outside, the amber sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of copper and rose. The shuttle on the landing pad powered down its auxiliary systems, settling in for a longer wait than its pilot had anticipated. And in a small farmhouse on a forgotten colony world, 3 impossible souls found each other across the vast gulf of biology and culture and fear. 7 cycles. That's how long it had taken for Lord Kael'Theron to understand what true nobility meant. It had nothing to do with titles or bloodlines or the approval of councils. It had everything to do with standing beside the woman you loved and the child you never knew existed, and promising to face whatever came together, even if it meant defying an empire, even if it meant becoming impossible yourself, especially if it meant that. The morning sun cast long shadows across the farmland when Mira woke to find the strange Arkanni man still there. She sat up in bed, her fever broken, and stared at the figure sitting in the chair beside her window. He was reading from a datapad, his luminescent temple patterns glowing softly in the early light. "You stayed," she whispered. Kael'Theron looked up immediately. "I promised I would. How do you feel?" "Better." She touched her own temples gently. The buzzing stopped. "Did you do that?" "I helped guide your mind toward quiet, but you did the actual work." He set down the datapad and moved to sit on the edge of her bed. "Mira, your mother and I need to talk with you about something important. Do you feel strong enough?" The girl nodded, her strange, silver-ringed eyes wide with curiosity and something that might have been hope. Elara appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with breakfast. "You're awake. Good. Your fever finally broke around midnight." She set the tray on the bedside table and sat on the other side of the bed. "Mira, sweetheart, Kyle has something to tell you." The child looked between them, her expression suddenly guarded. At 6 years old, she had already learned that important conversations often meant difficult truths. "Am I in trouble?" "No." Kael'Theron felt his chest tighten at the fear in her voice. "No, you're not in trouble, but I need to be honest with you about who I am. You're Arkanni, like my father was." She said it matter-of-factly, as if reciting a lesson. "Mama said he had to leave because he had important work. She said he didn't know about me. That's true. I didn't know." Kael'Theron took a breath, drawing on decades of diplomatic training to find the right words. But diplomacy failed him. In the end, he simply said the truth. "Mira, I am your father." The girl went very still. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, processing this information with an intelligence that seemed far beyond her years. Then quietly she asked, "Are you going to leave again?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. "No, I'm staying." "For how long?" "For as long as you need me. For as long as your mother will have me here." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched the luminescent patterns on her temple. "These marks that we share, they're special. They're part of what makes the Arkanni people unique, but they need to be trained, controlled. Without training, they can hurt. I'm here to teach you how to use them, how to make them yours instead of something that frightens you." Mira's hand came up to cover his, pressing his palm more firmly against her temple. "You can teach me to make the buzzing stop?" "Yes." "And to not make the lights flicker when I get upset?" "Yes." "And to understand why I can sometimes feel what other people are feeling even when they don't say anything?" Kael'Theron exchanged a glance with Elara. The telepathic sensitivity was developing faster than he'd expected. "Yes, all of that, and more." The child was quiet for another moment. Then, with the directness that only children possessed, she asked, "Do you want to be my father? Or do you have to because of duty?" The question struck him like a physical blow. How did she know to ask that? How did she understand at 6 years old the difference between obligation and desire? But looking at her face, at the vulnerability in those impossible eyes, he understood. She had been the impossible child all her life, the one who didn't fit, who had to be hidden, whose very existence was a secret. Of course she would question whether she was wanted or merely accepted. "I want to," he said, and was surprised to find his voice rough with emotion. "Mira, I didn't know you existed until yesterday, but from the moment I saw you, I knew that you were the most important thing in my life. More important than my title, my position, my duties to the Empire. You are my daughter, and I am proud to be your father." Tears welled in the girl's eyes. "Really? Really?" She launched herself at him then, wrapping her small arms around his neck with desperate strength. Kael'Theron held her, this impossible child, and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of himself. He had spent 2 centuries learning to be Arkanni, learning to embody the cold precision and controlled superiority of his people. In one moment, a 6-year-old hybrid child had taught him that all of that was nothing compared to this. Elara watched them with tears streaming down her own face. When Mira finally pulled back, still sniffling, Elara wiped her daughter's cheeks gently. "All right, little one. Eat your breakfast and get dressed. Your father and I need to make some plans." "Can I help with the plans?" Mira asked hopefully. "The plans are about keeping you safe," Kael'Theron said, "and teaching you properly, so yes, you'll be very involved in them." The girl beamed and attacked her breakfast with newfound enthusiasm. Downstairs, Kael'Theron and Elara sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea growing cold between them. Through the window, they could see the shuttle pilot pacing near his craft, clearly frustrated by the extended delay. "I need to return to the depot," Kael'Theron said. "File the appropriate reports, establish my cover story, but I'll be back by evening." "And then? Then we begin in earnest. I'll need to set up a training regimen for Mira. The basics first. Meditation techniques, mental shields, emotional control. As she progresses, we'll move into the more advanced applications." He paused. "Elara, I need you to understand something. Training an Arkanni child is a years-long process. It's not something that can be rushed." "How long?" "Usually formal training begins around age 10 and continues into their mid-20s. But Mira is already manifesting abilities. We're starting late, which means we'll need to be more intensive, more careful." Elara wrapped her hands around her teacup. "Is it dangerous?" "It can be. If she tries to access abilities before she has the foundation to control them, she could damage her own neural pathways, or worse, accidentally hurt someone else." He saw her face pale and added quickly, "But with proper guidance, she'll be fine. More than fine. She has incredible potential." "Because she's hybrid?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps simply because she's exceptional." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Human children learn things that Arkanni children struggle with. Language acquisition, emotional intelligence, adaptability. And Arkanni children learn things that human children cannot. Neural electric manipulation, harmonic communication, telepathic sensitivity. Mira has the potential for both. If anyone finds out, they won't. Not if we're careful." He squeezed her hand gently. "I've spent the night thinking through the logistics. I'll establish a formal diplomatic posting here, a cultural liaison position, monitoring human Arkanni integration. It will give me legal justification for an extended presence on the colony. Won't people question why a high diplomatic envoy is wasting his time on a backwater farm world? Let them question. I'll craft a narrative about the importance of grassroots assessment, of understanding human colonists at the ground level. It's actually quite brilliant politically. It makes me appear more connected to the common people, less elitist. My rivals at court will hate it, which will only make it more believable." Elara smiled despite herself. "You're enjoying this, the scheming." "I'm enjoying the purpose. For 7 cycles, I've been playing political games that ultimately meant very little. Now I have something real to fight for." He stood, reluctant to leave but knowing he must. "I need to go, but I'll return before sunset. In the meantime, keep Mira calm. No strong emotions if you can help it. They trigger the neural electric responses. Easier said than done with a 6-year-old. "I know. Do your best." He moved toward the door, but Elara's voice stopped him. "Kael, thank you. For staying, for caring. I know it's complicated and dangerous and probably completely insane, but thank you." He turned back and cupped her face in his hands, studying the features he had tried so hard to forget. "Thank you for keeping her safe. For all these years, alone and afraid, you protected our daughter. That's true nobility, Elara. Not bloodlines or titles. What you did, that's what noble actually means." Then he kissed her, gently, a question and a promise all at once. She melted into him, and for a moment they were 7 cycles in the past, young and foolish and impossibly in love. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "You're going to miss your shuttle," Elara whispered. "Let them wait." But eventually, duty called. Kael'Theron forced himself to step back, to walk to the door, to descend the steps of the house that had become infinitely more important than any palace or council chamber. The shuttle pilot practically ran to meet him. "My lord, we're 3 hours past our scheduled departure. The depot has been transmitting inquiries. Tell them I was conducting a thorough agricultural assessment," which is the truth. Kael'Theron climbed into the shuttle without looking back. If he looked back, he might not be able to leave at all. The flight to the depot took only minutes, but Kael'Theron used the time to compose his official report. The words came easily, a careful blend of truth and misdirection. He praised the efficiency of the farmsteads, noted the potential for increased production with proper investment, recommended that the Empire take a more active interest in Colony 7's agricultural output. All perfectly reasonable, all perfectly defensible, all carefully designed to give him a reason to return again and again. At the depot, he filed his reports and sent a series of encrypted messages to trusted contacts on Arkanni Prime. He would need political support for what he was planning, allies who owed him favors and could help establish his new posting. By mid-afternoon, he had secured temporary quarters at the depot and began assembling the materials he would need for Mira's training. Meditation crystals, neural interface training devices, educational databases on Arkanni mental discipline techniques. Lord Kael'Theron? He turned to find a human woman in colonial administrative uniform approaching. She was middle-aged, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who had earned her position through competence rather than politics. "Administrator Chen," he said, recognizing the colony's chief administrator. "How may I assist you? I was hoping you could clarify your extended presence here. Your initial mission brief indicated a 3-day inspection tour, but I'm now receiving reports that you've requested an indefinite posting." Kael'Theron had been expecting this conversation. "My preliminary assessment indicates that Colony 7 would benefit from sustained Imperial oversight. There are opportunities here that have been overlooked, such as agricultural innovation, for one. Your farmers have developed hybridization techniques that could be valuable across multiple colonies. I also believe there's potential for improved human-Arkanni cultural exchange. Your colonists represent an excellent baseline for integration studies." Administrator Chen's expression remained neutral. "And this requires your personal attention? Couldn't a junior diplomatic officer handle such assessments?" "Perhaps, but I prefer to be thorough. And frankly, Administrator, I've spent 7 cycles navigating court politics on Arkanni Prime. A change of pace would be welcome." The Administrator studied him for a long moment. "There are rumors, Lord Kael'Theron." His expression didn't change, but internally he went on high alert. "Oh? Rumors that 7 cycles ago you were involved with one of our colonists, a farmer named Elara Chen." She paused. "My niece, actually." The universe seemed to tilt slightly. "Your niece?" "Yes. She's always been private about her personal life, but family talks. And now a high diplomatic envoy returns to our little colony and spends hours at her farm." Administrator Chen's eyes were sharp. "I'm not a fool, my lord. And I'm not blind to the fact that Elara has been raising a child alone, a child she's remarkably secretive about." Kael'Theron's mind raced through possible responses, discarding each as inadequate. Finally, he opted for a version of the truth. "Your niece is an impressive woman. She was impressive 7 cycles ago, and I suspect she remains so now. That's not a denial." "No, it's not. Are you going to hurt her again?" The question was direct, almost aggressive, completely improper for a colonial administrator to ask a high diplomatic envoy, and Kael'Theron respected her immensely for it. "No," he said firmly. "I made a mistake 7 cycles ago. I'm here to correct it." Administrator Chen nodded slowly. "Good. Because Elara deserves better than to be someone's political complication, and that child of hers deserves a stable life." "Agreed on both counts. Then we understand each other." The administrator's tone became more formal. "For the record, Colony 7 welcomes sustained Imperial oversight. I'll approve your posting request and assign you appropriate quarters and resources." "Thank you, Administrator." "Don't thank me yet. You'll be expected to actually do the work you're claiming is cover. Agricultural assessments, integration reports, cultural exchange programs. If you're going to be here, you're going to contribute. I wouldn't have it any other way." Administrator Chen turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Elara's daughter, Mira. She's special, isn't she?" Kael'Theron's entire body tensed. "What makes you say that?" "I've seen the medical requisitions, the homeschooling permits, the way Elara guards her privacy so fiercely." The administrator's expression softened. "I don't know the details, and maybe I don't want to. But if that child needs protection, she'll have it." "Family takes care of family. Even family, that's a bit unusual." She walked away before Kael'Theron could respond, leaving him standing in the depot's main corridor, wondering if they had just gained an ally or exposed a dangerous vulnerability. By evening, when he returned to the farm in a rented ground transport loaded with training equipment, he was still processing the conversation. Elara met him at the door, and he could immediately tell something had changed. "What happened?" he asked. "Mira's been practicing, or trying to. She tried to meditate like you said, and accidentally put every electronic device in the house into feedback mode. It took me 2 hours to reset everything." But Elara was smiling. She was so proud of herself for making the buzzing big enough to share. Despite the chaos, Kael'Theron found himself smiling too. That's actually a positive sign. It means she's learning to project instead of just receiving. But we need to teach her control before she accidentally takes out the farm's entire power grid. She's waiting for you in the living room. She's been asking about you every 10. The 3 days before Kael'Theron's departure passed too quickly. He spent every waking hour with Mira, cramming months of training into intensive sessions that left them both exhausted but satisfied. The child's progress was nothing short of extraordinary. By the second day, she could maintain her still point for hours at a time. By the third, she was beginning to understand how to read the emotional resonance of others, the first step toward true telepathic sensitivity. "I can feel when Mama is worried," Mira said during their final training session. "It's like a tight feeling in my chest, even when she's in another room." "That's empathic resonance," Kael'Theron explained. "The ability to sense emotions in those you're bonded with. It's strong with family, weaker with strangers. As you develop, you'll learn to interpret the sensations more accurately." "Can I make it stop? Sometimes it's really loud." "Yes, with practice. The still point helps with that too. You can retreat there when the emotions around you become overwhelming. It's not shutting people out. It's protecting yourself so you don't drown in what others are feeling." Mira nodded seriously, absorbing the information with the intensity of a child who understood that these lessons might save her life someday. On the evening before his departure, Kael'Theron sat with Elara on the porch while Mira slept inside, exhausted from the day's intensive training. "She's going to be devastated when you leave," Elara said quietly. "She's gotten used to having you here." "I know. I'm devastated too." He stared out at the alien landscape, the amber sky now familiar instead of strange. 3 days. That's all I've had with her. And already the thought of being apart feels unbearable. Welcome to parenthood. It doesn't get easier. "How did you do this alone for 6 years? Elara was quiet for a moment. "I didn't have a choice. And I had something you don't. The certainty that no one was watching me, questioning my every move. You're going back to a place where one wrong word could destroy everything." "I know. Kael, what if they don't let you come back? What if they decide that Colony 7 isn't worth a high diplomatic envoy's time? What if they reassign you somewhere else? Then I'll resign my position." She turned to him sharply. "You can't do that. It would raise too many questions." "I don't care. Elara, I spent 7 cycles climbing the ranks of Imperial service, building my reputation, accumulating power and influence, and I would throw all of it away in a heartbeat if it meant staying with you and Mira." He took her hand. "I'm not leaving you again. Not permanently. Whatever it takes, I'm coming back. Even if it means losing everything you've worked for. Everything I worked for was empty. You, Mira, this impossible family. This is real. This matters." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm scared. For all of us. So am I. But we're strong enough to face whatever comes." Together, they sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set in shades of copper and rose. Eventually, Elara spoke again, her voice soft. "Kael, there's something I need to tell you. Something about Mira that I haven't mentioned yet." He tensed slightly. "What is it?" "She's not just developing Arkanni abilities. She's developing human ones too. Enhanced versions." "What do you mean?" "Her immune system. It's extraordinary. She's never been seriously sick until this fever, and even that broke faster than it should have. Her healing rate is accelerated. Cuts and bruises that should take days heal in hours. And her learning capacity..." Elara paused. "Kael, she taught herself to read at age 3, complex mathematics at 4. She absorbs information at a rate that would be exceptional even for an adult." "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because I wasn't sure if it was normal for Arkanni children. I've never met one before." "Is it?" "No. Arkanni children are intellectually advanced compared to humans, but not to that degree. And our healing, while efficient, is not dramatically faster than human norms." He processed this information. "She's not just hybrid, she's enhanced. The combination of our genetics created something neither of us could have predicted. Is that bad? I don't know. It could make her more vulnerable to discovery, or it could make her strong enough to survive whatever the Empire throws at her." He squeezed Elara's hand. "Either way, we protect her, we teach her, and we make sure she grows up knowing that being different is not the same as being wrong." You sound like you're preparing for war. Perhaps I am. The Empire doesn't take kindly to things that challenge their understanding of how the universe should work. Mira is living proof that their genetic purity laws are based on false assumptions. That makes her dangerous to them. Then maybe we should run. Take her somewhere the Empire can't reach. There is nowhere the Empire can't reach. Not in this galaxy. Our only option is to make her too strong to be vulnerable, too valuable to eliminate, and too well connected to be disappeared quietly. Elara pulled back to look at him. That's a political strategy, not a protection plan. It's both. Mira needs to become undeniable, a symbol of what's possible rather than a threat to be eliminated. That will take time, training, and careful management of her public exposure. He stood and began pacing. When I return from Arkanni Prime, we need to start building a network of allies, people who know about her and have reasons to protect her. Your aunt is a start, but we need more. Who can we trust? I don't know yet, but we have time. She's only 6. By the time she reaches adolescence and her abilities become fully manifested, we need to have a fortress of political and social protection around her. That's 8 or 9 years away, which gives us 8 or 9 years to prepare. He stopped pacing and looked at her. Elara, I know you've been living day to day, just trying to keep her safe and hidden, but we need to shift our thinking. We need to plan for a future where she doesn't have to hide. A future where the Empire accepts a hybrid child? That's fantasy. Maybe. Or maybe it's the future we create, one careful step at a time. They talked long into the night, planning and strategizing, 2 parents trying to build a safe world for an impossible child. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, and they retired to their separate rooms. But Kael'Theron couldn't sleep. He lay awake, thinking about the journey ahead, about the conversations he would need to navigate, about the lies he would need to tell convincingly. A soft sound at his door made him sit up. Mira stood in the doorway, clutching her blanket. I can't sleep, she whispered. I keep thinking about you leaving. Come here. She padded across the room and climbed onto the bed. He wrapped an arm around her, and she curled against his side like she'd been doing it her whole life. Are you scared? She asked. A little. Are you? Yeah. What if something bad happens and you can't come back? Then I'll find another way. Mira, I need you to understand something. The bond we've formed, the connection between us, that doesn't break just because of distance. I'll be able to feel you even across the galaxy, and you'll be able to feel me. Really? Really. If you're scared or in trouble, reach out with your mind the way I showed you. Find your still point and then reach beyond it. I'll be listening. Will it hurt? Reaching that far? It might be uncomfortable, like stretching a muscle you haven't used before, but it won't hurt you, and it might save you someday. So it's important that you know how. They lay quietly for a moment. Then Mira said, I'm glad you're my father. Even if it's scary and complicated and we have to hide, I'm glad too. More glad than I can possibly express. When you come back, can we practice flying the training crystal? You said when I'm better at control, we can make it hover. Absolutely. That will be the first thing we work on. Promise? Promise. She fell asleep against him, her breathing deep and even. Kael'Theron lay awake for another hour, memorizing the weight of her, the sound of her breathing, the faint glow of the luminescent patterns on her temple. His daughter. His impossible, miraculous, terrifying daughter. And he was about to walk into the heart of the Empire that would destroy her if they knew she existed. Morning came too soon. Kael'Theron dressed in his formal diplomatic attire, the elegant robes that marked his rank and status. When he emerged from the guest room, he found Elara making breakfast and Mira sitting at the table, her eyes red from crying. I know you have to go, the child said before he could speak. Mama explained, but I don't like it. I don't like it either. He sat beside her. But I'll be back before you know it. And while I'm gone, I want you to keep practicing. Your mother can help you with the basic exercises. It's not the same without you. I know. But it's important that you can maintain your skills even when I'm not here. Can you do that for me? Mira nodded miserably. The ground transport arrived too soon. Kael'Theron gathered his things, then spent a long moment simply holding Elara and Mira, trying to memorize the feel of them in his arms. I'll send messages when I can, he told Elara. Coded, but you'll recognize them. And if anything happens, anything at all, contact Administrator Chen. She'll know how to reach me. Just come back safely. That's all we need. I will. He kissed them both, then forced himself to walk to the waiting transport. As it pulled away, he looked back to see them standing in the doorway. Elara with her arm around Mira, both watching him leave with expressions that broke his heart. The journey to Arkanni Prime took 3 days via the fastest Imperial courier ship. Kael'Theron spent the time reviewing his cover story, memorizing the details of his agricultural assessment, preparing himself for the scrutiny he would face. But at night, alone in his cabin, he would reach out with his telepathic sense, stretching across the growing distance to find the faint echo of Mira's presence. She was practicing, he could tell, maintaining her still point, working on her control. And each time he touched that connection, she would respond with a pulse of recognition and love that made the distance bearable. Arkanni Prime appeared in the viewport like a jewel against the darkness of space. The homeworld of his species was a marvel of crystal architecture and advanced technology, its cities gleaming beneath force shields that protected them from the harsh stellar radiation of their twin suns. It had always filled him with pride to see it. Now, it filled him with dread. The courier docked at the primary diplomatic port. Kael'Theron disembarked to find a formal escort waiting. 6 guards in ceremonial armor and a junior diplomatic aide who bowed deeply. "Lord Kael'Theron, welcome home. The High Council has been expecting you. If you'll follow me, they've convened a special session to receive your report." A special session? That's unusual for a routine colonial assessment. The aide's expression remained neutral. "The Council takes all reports seriously, my lord, especially those from envoys of your standing." Warning bells rang in Kael'Theron's mind. A special session meant they were interested in his activities. Very interested. He followed the escort through the gleaming corridors of the diplomatic complex, nodding to colleagues he passed but not stopping to chat. Finally, they reached the council chamber, an immense room with vaulted ceilings and walls that seemed to be made of living light. The High Council of Arkanni sat in a semicircle on an elevated platform, 12 of the most powerful beings in the Empire, each representing a different aspect of Arkanni society: military, science, culture, religion, economics. And at the center, the supreme coordinator, eldest and wisest of them all. Kael'Theron bowed deeply. "Honored Council, I report as summoned. Lord Kael'Theron." The supreme coordinator's voice was ancient and multi-layered, carrying harmonics that spoke of centuries of wisdom. "You have been absent from your primary duties for an extended period. We would hear the reasoning for this absence. I conducted a comprehensive assessment of Colony 7, as noted in my initial mission brief. The colony showed potential that warranted deeper investigation. Colony 7. One of the council members, Lord Vexus Thor of the Military Directorate, leaned forward. "A minor human agricultural world. Why would such a place require the attention of our high diplomatic envoy?" "Because we have been neglecting our human colonies, my lord. We expand the empire, we absorb these worlds, but we rarely ensure they're properly integrated. Colony 7 proved to be an excellent case study in what can happen when human colonists are left to develop innovative solutions without imperial oversight." "Innovative solutions," another council member echoed, her tone skeptical. "Explain." Kael'Theron launched into his prepared report, detailing agricultural techniques, resource management strategies, and the potential for expanded imperial investment. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had spent weeks studying the subject rather than a few days. The council listened, asked pointed questions, and seemed at least partially satisfied with his answers. But then the Supreme Coordinator raised one 3-fingered hand for silence. "Your report is thorough and well-reasoned, Lord Kael'Theron. However, there are aspects of your stay on Colony 7 that concern us. Specifically, your extended time at a single farmstead owned by a human woman named Elara Chen." Kael'Theron's expression didn't change, though his heart rate spiked. The Chen farmstead was an excellent example of sustainable agricultural practices. I spent considerable time there assessing their methodologies. Considerable time indeed. Security logs show you visited the farmstead daily, stayed overnight on multiple occasions. One might wonder what agricultural assessment requires such intimacy. The word intimacy hung in the air like an accusation. "The Chen family was cooperative and informative," Kael'Theron said carefully, "and Ms. Chen herself proved to be an invaluable source of information about human colonial life. We are aware of your previous relationship with this human," Lord Vexthor said bluntly. 7 cycles ago, during your first assignment to Colony 7. Do you deny that you resumed this inappropriate liaison? I deny that any aspect of my conduct was inappropriate. My relationship with Ms. Chen, both then and now, has been professional and conducive to my diplomatic mission. Professional. The word was repeated with clear disbelief. "Lord Kael'Theron, you are a high diplomatic envoy, a member of one of the oldest houses on Arkanni Prime. Your conduct reflects not only on yourself but on the entire Arkanni Empire. Emotional entanglements with humans are unseemly. Unseemly, Kael'Theron repeated, allowing a note of challenge to enter his voice. Not illegal, not forbidden, simply unseemly. Yes, then I am guilty of being unseemly. But I am not guilty of neglecting my duties or bringing shame upon the Empire. My report stands on its own merits, regardless of my personal relationships. The council members exchanged glances, a complex web of nonverbal communication passing between them. Finally, the Supreme Coordinator spoke again. Your report is accepted. Your recommendation for increased Imperial investment in Colony 7 will be reviewed by the appropriate committees. However, Lord Kael'Theron, we must insist that your future presence on that world be limited to brief official visits. The appearance of favoritism or emotional compromise cannot be tolerated in our diplomatic corps. It was a trap. Accept the limitation, and he would be cut off from Mira and Elara. Refuse, and he would have to provide reasons that might expose the secret he was protecting. With respect, Supreme Coordinator, I disagree with that assessment. The very reason Colony 7 showed such promise was precisely because I took the time to understand it at a ground level. Brief visits and official inspections give us data. Extended presence gives us understanding. If we truly wish to integrate human colonies into the Empire, we must be willing to do more than collect reports. We must live among them, understand them, value them as more than resources to be exploited. A noble sentiment, Lord Vexithor said with clear sarcasm, but one that conveniently allows you to continue your romantic pursuits under the guise of duty. My romantic pursuits, as you call them, do not interfere with my ability to serve the Empire. In fact, I would argue they enhance it. I understand humans better than most of this council precisely because I have allowed myself to connect with them on a personal level. That understanding has made me a better diplomat, a better envoy, and a better servant of the Empire. The chamber fell silent. What Kael'Theron had just said bordered on insubordination, suggesting that the council's distance from humans was a weakness rather than a strength. But it was also undeniably true. Finally, the Supreme Coordinator spoke, and there was something that might have been amusement in those ancient eyes. You have always been bold, young Kael'Theron. It is one of your strengths and one of your greatest weaknesses. Very well. You may return to Colony 7 and continue your assessment work. But know this, we will be watching, and should your personal entanglements compromise your judgment or your loyalty to the Empire, you will be recalled and replaced. Is this understood? Perfectly, Supreme Coordinator. Then you are dismissed. You may return to Colony 7 within the next cycle. Kael'Theron bowed deeply and retreated from the council chamber. Only when he was safely in the corridor did he allow himself to release the breath he'd been holding. He had won. Barely. But he had won. The aide who had escorted him was waiting. Well done, my lord. Few could have defended such a precarious position so effectively. Thank you. I believe I'll return to my quarters now. I have much to arrange before my departure. But as he walked through the crystal corridors of the diplomatic complex, he felt the weight of scrutiny settling over him like a shroud. The council was watching. They suspected something, even if they didn't know what. He would need to be more careful, more discreet, and somehow he would need to protect Mira while the Empire's most powerful beings looked for any excuse to destroy what he had built. That evening, alone in his quarters with the twin suns setting beyond his window, Kael'Theron reached out with his telepathic sense. Across the vast distance of space, he found the familiar echo of his daughter's mind. She was asleep, but dreaming. And in her dreams she was practicing, maintaining her still point even in unconsciousness. Pride and love swelled in his chest. He sent a gentle pulse of reassurance across the connection. I'm coming back. Soon, I promise. And though she was too young and too far away to send a clear response, he felt something come back. A pulse of love and trust that made the distance bearable. 3 more days. He could endure 3 more days of political maneuvering and careful lies, and then he would return to the 2 people who mattered more than any empire. But first, he had work to do. If the council was watching, he needed to give them exactly what they expected to see, a dedicated diplomat pursuing legitimate imperial interests, which meant he needed to build his cover story into something unassailable. He spent the next 2 days in a flurry of activity. He met with agricultural specialists and requested detailed analyses of Colony 7's farming techniques. He presented proposals for expanded imperial investment and improved technology transfer. He scheduled follow-up visits to other human colonies, creating a pattern of behavior that made his interest in Colony 7 seem like part of a larger initiative rather than a personal obsession. By the time he boarded the courier ship for his return journey, he had created a paper trail that would justify years of continued presence on Colony 7. The Council would still watch, would still suspect, but they would find nothing concrete to use against him. The 3-day journey back felt longer than the 3 days away. Kael'Theron paced his cabin, reached out repeatedly to touch the distant echo of Mira's mind, and tried to calculate how much longer he could maintain this precarious balancing act. Finally, Colony 7 appeared in the viewport. The courier ship descended through familiar amber clouds, and within an hour, Kael'Theron was back on the ground, requisitioning a transport to take him to the farmstead. It was late afternoon when he arrived. Before the transport had fully stopped, Mira burst out of the house and ran toward him. He barely had time to disembark before she threw herself into his arms. "You came back! You came back! I told you I would." He held her tight, feeling 6 years of missed embraces compressed into this single moment. "I will always come back." Elara emerged from the house more slowly, but her smile was radiant. When she reached them, Kael'Theron pulled her into the embrace as well, and for a moment, the three of them simply stood together in the fading amber light. "How bad was it?" Elara asked quietly. "Bad enough, but manageable. I'll explain everything later." That night, after Mira was asleep, he told Elara about the council session, about the suspicions and warnings and the precarious permission he had won to continue his work. "They're watching," he concluded, "which means we need to be even more careful. No more overnight stays unless there's a legitimate reason. More time spent at other farms to maintain the cover story. Less obvious favoritism. That's going to be hard on Mira. I know, but it's necessary. The alternative is losing access entirely." Elara was quiet for a moment, then said, "There's something else. While you were gone, Administrator Chen came by. She's been doing some research into human Arkanni hybrid possibilities. She found something." "What?" "Historical records. Apparently there have been other hybrids. Not many, maybe a dozen over the past 2 centuries, and every single one was either terminated or disappeared into Imperial research facilities." Kael'Theron felt his blood run cold. "Every single one?" "According to the records Maria could access, yes. She thinks there might be more that were successfully hidden, but..." Elara's voice broke slightly. "Kael, what if we can't protect her? What if no matter what we do, the Empire finds out and takes her away?" He pulled her close. "Then we make sure they never find out. And if they do, we make sure they understand that taking her means going through both of us. And through whatever network of allies we can build. Against the entire Empire? If necessary, yes. Elara, I stood in front of the High Council and defended my right to be here. I told them, in essence, that human connections make me a better diplomat rather than a compromised one. I'm committed to this path now. There's no turning back. You could have been executed for insubordination, but I wasn't. Because what I said was true, even if they don't want to acknowledge it. The Empire's greatest weakness is its inability to truly value other species, and that weakness is becoming impossible to ignore." Elara pulled back to look at him. "You're talking about something bigger than just protecting Mira. Am I? I don't know anymore. Maybe protecting Mira and changing the Empire are the same goal. Maybe the only way to truly keep her safe is to create a galaxy where she doesn't need to hide. That's revolution talk. No, that's evolution talk. The Empire will change or it will collapse under the weight of its own prejudices. I'm simply trying to guide that change in a direction that keeps my family safe." They stood together in the quiet farmhouse, 2 people from impossible different worlds, plotting a future that defied everything the galaxy believed was possible. And upstairs, their impossible daughter slept peacefully, dreaming of stars and spaces between, unaware that her very existence was about to reshape the destiny of an empire. But she would learn. In time, she would learn. And when she did, the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months passed in a delicate dance of routine and secrecy. Kael'Theron maintained his cover with meticulous care, dividing his time between multiple farmsteads across Colony 7, filing detailed reports, and building the appearance of a comprehensive agricultural assessment program. But every 3rd or 4th day, he would find his way back to the Chen farmstead, bringing training materials and spending precious hours with Mira. The child's abilities had grown exponentially. At 7 years old now, she could maintain complex telepathic shields, read emotional resonance with startling accuracy, and control her neural electric output with precision that would have impressed master trainers on Arkanni Prime. But more than her abilities, her understanding had deepened. She knew she was different. She knew she had to be careful. and she knew that the galaxy beyond her farm was both wondrous and dangerous. "Tell me about the crystal cities again," she would beg during their training sessions. "The ones on Arkanni Prime." And Kael'Theron would describe them, weaving tales of his homeworld that made her eyes shine with wonder. He never told her she couldn't go there. He never said that a hybrid child would be seized the moment she set foot on Arkanni soil. He simply let her dream, knowing that someday she would need those dreams to fuel her courage. But today's training session was different. Today, they were attempting something dangerous. "Projection," Kael'Theron explained, setting up a series of small electronic devices across the training room, "is the ability to externalize your neural electric energy with purpose and control. You've been doing it unconsciously since you were a baby. Now we're going to teach you to do it deliberately." Mira studied the devices with serious concentration. "What am I supposed to do?" "I want you to choose one device, only one, and I want you to send a pulse of energy to it, enough to activate it, but not so much that you affect the others." "That seems hard." "It is hard. Most Arkanni students don't attempt this until they're at least 15 years old. But you're ready." The confidence in his voice made Mira straighten with pride. She closed her eyes, found her still point, and then reached outward with her mind. Kael'Theron watched the luminescent patterns on her temples flicker with concentration. One device beeped, then another. Then all of them lit up simultaneously, and the lights in the room flickered. Mira's eyes snapped open, frustrated. "I'm doing it wrong." "You're doing it powerfully. That's not the same as wrong. Try again. But this time, imagine your energy as a thread instead of a wave. Narrow, focused, precise." She tried again, and again, and again. By the fourth attempt, she managed to activate only 3 devices instead of all of them. By the 7th, she got it down to 2. And on the 10th attempt, a single device beeped, clear and alone. Mira's face lit up with triumph. "I did it. Yes, you did. And that's enough for today." This kind of precision work is exhausting, but Mira was already riding the high of success. "Can I try something else, please? I've been thinking about what you said about telepathic communication, how Arkanni can send thoughts to each other, and I want to try—" "Mira, no. We've talked about this. Telepathic speech is extremely advanced. Attempting it before you have the proper foundation can cause serious damage. But I feel like I'm ready. I've been practicing the visualization exercises you gave me and—" "The answer is no." Kael'Theron's tone was firm but gentle. "I know you want to advance quickly. I know you're frustrated by limitations. But some lessons cannot be rushed. Trust me on this." Mira's expression fell, but she nodded. "Okay. Can we at least work on levitation next time? You promised we'd practice making the training crystal hover." "That I can agree to." They were packing up the training equipment when Elara appeared in the doorway, her face pale and tense. "Kael, we have visitors. Imperial visitors." His blood turned to ice. "Who?" "I don't know. 2 Arkanni in official uniforms. They're asking for you. Get Mira upstairs. Now. And stay there until I come get you." "But—" "Now, Elara." She grabbed Mira's hand and pulled her toward the stairs. The child looked back at Kael'Theron with fear in her strange eyes, but he gave her what he hoped was a reassuring nod. Then he composed himself, drew on every ounce of diplomatic training he possessed, and walked out to meet whatever threat had arrived at his door. 2 Arkanni stood in the farmyard, both wearing the deep purple uniforms of Imperial Investigation Services. The taller of the 2, a female with elaborate temple patterns that marked her as high-ranking, stepped forward. "Lord Kael'Theron, I am Investigator Shalin, and this is my colleague Investigator Morketh. We've been dispatched by the High Council to conduct a follow-up assessment of your work on Colony 7. "Investigator." Kael'Theron bowed with exactly the correct degree of respect. "I wasn't informed that the Council planned to send a review team. Surprise assessments are more effective at capturing authentic conditions." Shalin's gaze swept across the farmstead with calculating precision. "You've been spending considerable time at this particular farm. We'd like to understand why. The Chen farmstead represents an excellent model of sustainable agricultural practices. I've been using it as a baseline for comparison across multiple colonies." "Indeed. And the human who operates this farmstead, Elara Chen. You've known her for some time?" "We met during my previous assignment here, yes. And renewed your acquaintance upon your return." "I renewed my acquaintance with many colonists upon my return. That's the nature of diplomatic work." Morketh, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Yet you don't spend multiple days per week at any other farmstead. Only this one. It was a trap, and Kael'Theron knew it. Deny too much and he would seem evasive. Admit too much, and he would give them ammunition. Ms. Chen has been exceptionally cooperative with my research. She's provided detailed data on crop yields, soil management, and resource allocation. She's also been willing to implement experimental techniques at my suggestion. That level of cooperation is rare and valuable. I see. Shalin pulled out a datapad. And the child we detected inside the residence. That would be Ms. Chen's daughter? Kael'Theron's heart hammered, but his expression remained neutral. Yes, Mira. She's 7 years old. Strange. There are no birth records for this child in the colonial database. Home births are common in frontier colonies. The paperwork often lags behind. Perhaps. Shalin's eyes narrowed. We'd like to meet her. And her mother. Standard protocol for a comprehensive assessment. Of course. Though I should mention that Mira is shy around strangers. Especially Arkanni strangers. Ms. Chen has been careful to limit her daughter's exposure to off-world influences. How protective. One might almost think she's hiding something. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Kael'Theron met Shalin's gaze steadily. One might also think she's simply being a cautious mother in an uncertain galaxy. Not every act of protection is an act of concealment. Profound words, Lord Kael'Theron. Now, if you would be so kind as to introduce us, there was no way out. Refusing would only confirm their suspicions. Kael'Theron led them into the house, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. Elara stood in the kitchen, her posture rigid but her expression neutral. Mira was nowhere to be seen. Ms. Chen, Shalin said pleasantly, thank you for allowing us into your home. We're conducting an assessment of Lord Kael'Theron's work here. I understand you have a daughter. Yes, Mira. She's upstairs. May we meet her? She's resting. She's been unwell recently. Nothing serious, I hope? Growing pains, childhood illnesses, nothing unusual. Of course. Still, we'd appreciate the opportunity to meet her. It's important that we understand the full context of the colony's population. Elara looked at Kael'Theron, a silent question in her eyes. He gave the slightest nod. They had no choice. I'll get her. But please be patient. She's not accustomed to visitors. Elara disappeared upstairs. Kael'Theron could feel the investigator's attention on him, measuring, assessing, looking for any sign of anxiety or deception. You seem quite comfortable here, my lord, Morketh observed. Almost as if this were your own home rather than a colonial farmstead. I've always believed in understanding the environments I assess. It's difficult to evaluate human integration if one maintains aristocratic distance. Some would say you've abandoned aristocratic distance entirely. Some would be mistaken. Footsteps on the stairs. Kael'Theron forced himself not to tense as Elara descended with Mira holding her hand. The child wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm weather, and she'd pulled her hair forward to partially obscure her face. But even partially hidden, her strangeness was apparent. The way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes, the subtle wrongness of her proportions that suggested she wasn't entirely human. Shalin's expression didn't change, but Kael'Theron saw the flicker of interest in her eyes. She had noticed something. Hello, Mira, the investigator said gently. My name is Shalin. I'm a friend of Lord Kael'Theron's. He's told me you're a very smart little girl. Mira pressed closer to her mother, but didn't speak. Elara placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. She's shy, Elara repeated. Of course. Mira, do you enjoy living here on the farm? A small nod. And Lord Kael'Theron visits sometimes? Another nod, smaller this time. Does he teach you things? About Arkanni culture, perhaps? Mira's eyes darted to Kael'Theron, seeking permission. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. He tells me stories, Mira said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. About the stars. How lovely. And do you like the stories? Yes, ma'am. Shalin studied the child for a long moment, then turned her attention back to Elara. Your daughter is very well spoken for her age. You must be an excellent teacher. I do my best. I'm certain you do. The investigator pulled out a small scanning device. If you don't mind, I'd like to take some basic biometric readings. Standard protocol for population assessment. No, Elara's voice was firm. I don't consent to scanning my child. It's completely harmless. Just basic health metrics. I said no. She's not one of your test subjects. She's a child, and you have no legal authority to scan her without parental consent, which I'm denying. Shalin's expression hardened. Ms. Chen, I could make this a formal investigation. That would give me quite a bit of legal authority. Then make it formal. And I'll contact the colonial administrator and file a complaint for harassment of civilians. I know my rights, investigator." The two women stared at each other, and Kael'Theron saw the moment when Shalin decided not to push. For now. "Very well. No scanning, but I will be noting your lack of cooperation in my report. Note whatever you like." The investigators stayed for another hour, asking questions about crop yields and resource allocation, maintaining the pretense of an agricultural assessment even as their true purpose hung unspoken in the air. Finally, they departed with cold courtesies and thinly veiled threats. The moment their transport disappeared over the horizon, Elara sagged against the wall. "They know," she whispered. "They know something's wrong. They suspect. That's not the same as knowing." Kael'Theron pulled out his communication device and began typing rapidly. "But you're right. They'll be back. And next time, they'll have authorization for those scans. What do? We move up the timeline. I'd hoped we'd have years to build Mira's strength and our network of allies, but if the Empire is sending investigators, we're out of time." He looked up at Elara. "We need to make Mira public, not as a hybrid child, but as something else. Something that gives her legal protection. What could possibly protect her from the Empire? Celebrity, importance, political value." His mind was racing now, pieces of a desperate plan falling into place. The Empire respects strength and usefulness. If we can demonstrate that Mira has abilities that are valuable, that contribute to Imperial interests, they'll be less likely to simply eliminate her. She's 7 years old. She's 7 years old with the telepathic sensitivity of a trained adult and the learning capacity of a prodigy. Elara, I've been teaching her, and what she can do is extraordinary. If we present her correctly, we can make her indispensable. Or we can paint a target on her back. The target is already there. We're just choosing how big and bright to make it. Right now, she's a hidden anomaly. Anomalies get eliminated, but proven assets, those get protected. Mira had been listening from the stairs. Now she descended fully, her young face set with determination that was heartbreaking in its maturity. "I'm not afraid," she said. "If showing what I can do will keep Mama safe, then I want to do it." "Sweetheart, no," Elara started. "Mama, I heard what the investigators said. I felt what they were feeling. They were suspicious and curious and a little bit scared. Scared of what they might find here." Mira looked at Kael'Theron. "You said that being different isn't the same as being wrong, so maybe it's time to show them that different can be better." Kael'Theron felt pride and terror warring in his chest. His daughter was 7 years old and already braver than most adults he knew. "If we do this," he said carefully, "there's no going back. Your life will change completely. No more quiet farm existence. No more hiding. You'll be scrutinized, tested, judged by beings who don't believe you should exist. But I'll be with you and Mama, right? Always. Then I can handle it." Elara was shaking her head. "This is insane. She's a child. We can't throw her to the Empire's wolves." "The wolves are already at our door," Kael'Theron said gently. "At least this way, we choose the battlefield." The debate raged for hours. Elara fought against the plan with desperate maternal protectiveness. Kael'Theron argued for it with cold strategic logic. And Mira, impossibly, was the calmest of them all. Finally, as the amber sun set beyond the windows, Elara surrendered. "Fine, we do it your way. But if this goes wrong, if they hurt her, they'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, Elara, I won't make it easy." The plan took shape over the following weeks. Kael'Theron used his political connections to arrange a demonstration for the High Council. Not a formal presentation, but an informal gathering where certain influential members would be present. A chance encounter, carefully orchestrated to appear spontaneous. He coached Mira relentlessly, not on hiding her abilities, but on showcasing them with precision and control. She would demonstrate telepathic sensitivity, emotional reading, and neural electric manipulation. She would prove herself useful, valuable, worth protecting. And they would reveal just enough of her hybrid nature to make it undeniable, but frame it as an advantage rather than a contamination. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only move they had. The day of the demonstration arrived too quickly. Kael'Theron had arranged for the High Council members to visit Colony 7 under the guise of inspecting his agricultural program. Administrator Chen, now a full ally in their cause, had provided logistical support and political cover. Mira wore a simple but elegant outfit, her hair pulled back to reveal the luminescent patterns on her temples that marked her as part Arkanni. She looked small and impossibly brave as she stood in the Colonial Administrative Center's main hall. Elara stood beside her, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, her expression a mask of calm that Kael'Theron knew cost her everything to maintain. The council members arrived in a show of power and precision: Lord Vexithor of the Military Directorate, Lady Synthera of the Science Collective, 3 others of varying ranks and responsibilities. And at their center, Investigator Shalin, her expression unreadable. "Lord Kael'Theron," Vexithor said coldly, "you've requested this meeting. We've granted it. Don't waste our time." "I wouldn't dream of it, my lord. I've brought you here to witness something remarkable, something that challenges our understanding of what's possible." He gestured to Mira. "This is Mira Chen. She's 7 years old, and she's going to demonstrate abilities that you won't believe possible." Shalin stepped forward, her gaze locked on Mira. "The child from the farmstead, the one whose mother refused to let me scan. The same, though I think you'll understand her mother's protectiveness once you see what Mira can do." Lady Synthera of the Science Collective moved closer, her analytical gaze sweeping over Mira with scientific precision. "She has temple patterns, faint, but present. That should be impossible for a human child." "It would be impossible," Kael'Theron agreed. "For a fully human child." The silence that followed was deafening. "Explain," Vexithor demanded. "7 cycles ago, I was stationed here on Colony 7. During that time, I formed a relationship with Elara Chen. We were careful. We followed all protocols. We were told repeatedly that biological incompatibility made conception impossible." He paused. "We were wrong." Shalin's expression transformed from suspicion to shock. "You're claiming this child is Arkanni human hybrid?" "I'm not claiming it. I'm stating it as fact. Mira is my daughter, and she's proof that everything we thought we knew about species compatibility is incomplete." The council members erupted in simultaneous reactions: Vexithor's fury, Synthera's fascination, the others' varying degrees of horror and interest. But before anyone could speak, Mira stepped forward. "Please," she said, her small voice cutting through the chaos with surprising authority. "Please let me show you what I can do. Then you can decide if I'm a mistake or a miracle." The council members fell silent, stunned by the child's composure. Lady Synthera recovered first. "Very well, child. Show us." Mira closed her eyes and found her still point. Kael'Theron could feel her reaching out, her telepathic sensitivity expanding to touch each of the council members in turn. "Lord Vexithor," she said quietly, her eyes still closed, "you're afraid. Not of me specifically, but of what I represent. Change, loss of control. You're thinking about your daughter, wondering if she could ever be with someone who isn't Arkanni, and that terrifies you." Vexithor went rigid. "How?" "Lady Synthera, you're fascinated. You want to study me, to understand how I'm possible. But underneath that is grief. You lost someone recently, a research partner, and you're thinking that if hybrid genetics are possible, maybe there are other impossibilities waiting to be proven real." Synthera's composure cracked slightly. Mira opened her eyes and looked at each council member in turn. "Investigator Shalin, you suspected I was unusual, but you didn't guess I was hybrid. Now you're calculating, trying to decide if I'm a threat or a resource. And you're remembering something, a classified file you read once, about other hybrids, about what happened to them." Shalin's face had gone pale. "I know what you're thinking," Mira continued, her voice soft but steady. "You're thinking that I should be eliminated or contained, that I'm evidence of genetic contamination, that letting me live sets a dangerous precedent." She took a breath. "But I'm also 7 years old. I love my mother. I love my father. I like learning about the stars and reading books and practicing telepathy. I'm a person, not a contamination. Not a precedent, a person." The council members stood frozen, each processing what they had just witnessed. Finally, Lady Synthera spoke. "Extraordinary. The telepathic sensitivity alone surpasses most trained Arkanni adults, and the emotional reading is precise beyond anything I've ever encountered." She looked at Kael'Theron. "How long has she been training?" 6 months of formal instruction, but she's been manifesting abilities since birth. Impossible. The neural structures required for such abilities take decades to develop. Apparently not in hybrid children. Vexithor found his voice. "This is an abomination. The genetic purity laws exist for a reason. This child should never have been allowed to survive, let alone develop abilities. Abilities that exceed those of pure-blood Arkanni," Kael'Theron interrupted. "Abilities that could be invaluable to the Empire? Tell me, Lord Vexithor, how often do you encounter 7-year-olds who can read the emotional state of military commanders?" Who can sense deception in treaty negotiations? Who can detect hostile intent before it becomes hostile action? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. You're so focused on what Mira represents that you're ignoring what she can do. The Empire is built on strength and utility. She embodies both. Lady Synthara was circling Mira now, studying her from every angle. The research potential alone is staggering. If we could understand the mechanism that allowed this hybridization, we could revolutionize our understanding of genetics. She's not a research subject, Elara said sharply. She's my daughter. She's both, Synthara replied, not unkindly. And that makes her perhaps the most important child in the Empire. Investigator Shaolin had been silent, processing. Now she spoke, her voice carefully neutral. There are protocols for situations like this. Protocols that were established precisely because hybrid children have occurred before, though rarely. They must be registered with Imperial intelligence. They must undergo comprehensive testing, and they must be monitored for their entire lives. Monitored, Elara repeated. You mean imprisoned. I mean protected and controlled. The alternative is termination. Be grateful I'm offering the former. Kael'Theron stepped between the investigator and his family. Mira will submit to registration and testing, but she remains with her mother and with me, and she will be treated as an Imperial asset, not a prisoner. Those are my terms. You don't have terms to offer, Lord Kael'Theron. You violated genetic purity laws, laws that assumed impossibility, laws that were never meant to address actual hybrid children because we all believed they couldn't exist. The law is unclear here, investigator, which means this is a matter for the High Council to decide, not you. The standoff held for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, Lady Synthara intervened. The child stays with her parents, for now. We conduct tests here on Colony 7 in a controlled environment. We assess her abilities, her stability, her potential, and then the full council decides what to do with her. She looked at Mira. Does that seem fair, child? Mira looked up at Kael'Theron, then at Elara, then back to the council members. Will you hurt me? During the tests? No. We're scientists, not monsters. You'll be uncomfortable, perhaps. Tired, certainly, but not harmed. And after the tests? After you decide what to do with me? That depends on what we discover. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a death sentence either. Mira squared her small shoulders. Okay, I'll do it. But my mama and father stay with me the whole time. I don't do anything alone. Agreed. And just like that, Mira Chen, impossible hybrid child, entered the official records of the Arkanni Empire. The tests began the next day and continued for weeks. Lady Synthara and her team of xenobiologists subjected Mira to every scan, every analysis, every assessment they could conceive. They mapped her neural structures, analyzed her genetic code, documented her abilities with scientific precision. And with each test, their amazement grew. Mira wasn't just hybrid, she was enhanced. Her human adaptability combined with Arkanni neural electric sensitivity had created something entirely new. Her learning capacity exceeded both species. Her emotional intelligence was off every chart. Her telepathic range and precision suggested she might someday rival the most powerful minds in the Empire. But it was her compassion that ultimately won them over. During one test designed to measure her response to negative emotions, Mira encountered a young Arkanni technician who was suppressing grief over a recent loss. Instead of simply identifying the emotion as the test required, Mira spent 20 minutes talking with the technician, offering comfort and understanding that left the young man in tears. She shouldn't be capable of that, Lady Synthara said quietly to Kael'Theron as they observed. Arkanni children don't develop that level of empathic response until well into adulthood. That's the human side, Kael'Theron replied. Humans feel deeply, immediately. They connect in ways we've trained ourselves not to. Mira has that gift. Gift. You call it a gift, don't you? Synthara watched Mira comforting the technician. I'm beginning to think I might. 6 weeks after the testing began, the High Council convened to review the findings and determine Mira's fate. Kael'Theron stood before them once more, but this time he didn't stand alone. Mira was beside him, small and brave, and behind them stood Elara, Administrator Chen, and Lady Synthara herself, who had become an unexpected advocate. The Supreme Coordinator reviewed the compiled data in silence. Finally, those ancient eyes rose to study Mira. Child, the Supreme Coordinator said in that multi-layered voice, you are an impossibility made real. A violation of natural law that somehow functions better than the laws it violates. The Council has reviewed your case extensively. We have considered termination. We have considered containment. We have considered study and exploitation. Mira didn't flinch. What did you decide? We decided that you are too valuable to destroy and too unique to waste. Therefore, you will be placed under the protection of imperial law. You will be registered as the first legally recognized hybrid citizen of the Arkanni Empire. You will undergo continued training and development, and when you reach maturity, you will serve the Empire in whatever capacity your abilities best suit. It wasn't freedom, but it was life, and it was recognition. And my parents? Mira asked. Your mother will retain full custody. Lord Kael'Theron will continue his duties while maintaining oversight of your development, and both will be held responsible for your actions until you reach the age of maturity. Mira looked up at Kael'Theron. He squeezed her hand gently and nodded. Thank you, Supreme Coordinator, Mira said clearly. I won't disappoint the Empire. See that you don't. You are now a symbol, child. A precedent. How you develop, how you serve, will determine the fate of any other hybrid children who might follow. That's a heavy burden for one so young. I know, but I won't be carrying it alone. The Supreme Coordinator's expression might have held the faintest trace of approval. No, you won't. Dismissed. Outside the council chamber, Elara pulled Mira into a fierce embrace. You were so brave in there, so impossibly brave. I learned from you, Mira mumbled into her mother's shoulder. Kael'Theron knelt beside them both. This isn't over. This is just the beginning. But we're still together. We're still a family. And that's what matters. Lady Synthera approached, her expression thoughtful. Lord Kael'Theron, I'd like to propose something. A formal research partnership. Mira's development will require specialized training that goes beyond what you can provide alone. I have resources, equipment, and expertise that could benefit her. And what would you gain from this partnership? Knowledge, understanding, the chance to study something that shouldn't exist but does. Also, she paused, something almost vulnerable in her expression. The chance to ensure that this remarkable child reaches her full potential instead of being crushed by the weight of expectation and fear. Kael'Theron looked at Elara, who nodded slowly. A partnership, then, but with conditions. Mira's well-being comes first, always. If I believe your research is harming her, I end it immediately. Agreed. They shook hands, 3 adults forming an alliance around one impossible child. That night, back at the farmstead, Mira sat on her bed while Kael'Theron tucked her in. She looked impossibly small and impossibly strong all at once. Father, she said quietly. Yes? What happens now? Now we move forward. You train, you learn, you grow, and we protect you every step of the way. Will other kids be mean to me when they find out I'm different? Probably. People often fear what they don't understand. That's stupid. Yes, it is, but it's also reality. You'll need to be strong, Mira. Stronger than any child should have to be. I know. She was quiet for a moment. But at least I don't have to be strong alone anymore. Before, it was just me and Mama. Now it's us and you and Lady Synthera and Aunt Maria. That's a lot of people on my side. And that number will grow. I promise you that. Mira smiled and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep, her luminescent temple patterns glowing softly in the darkness. Kael'Theron sat beside her bed for a long time, watching his daughter sleep and wondering what kind of future they had just created. A galaxy that knew about Mira would never be the same. For better or worse, everything had changed, and somehow, against impossible odds, they had survived. For now. 3 years passed like a dream and a battle simultaneously. Mira was 10 years old now, and the galaxy had learned her name. Not just her name, but what she represented. The first legally recognized hybrid child. The living proof that the boundaries between species were not as rigid as the Empire had believed. The farmstead had changed. Additional buildings had been constructed to house the training facility that Lady Synthera had established. Advanced equipment-lined rooms that had once held only agricultural supplies. And a rotating staff of scientists, trainers, and security personnel now moved through spaces that had once known only the quiet rhythms of farming life. But Elara had insisted on one thing. The original house remained theirs alone. No scientists, no observers, just family. It was early morning when the message arrived. Kael'Theron was reviewing training reports in what had become his office when the priority communication chimed. The encryption signature identified it as coming directly from the Supreme Coordinator. He opened it with a sense of foreboding. Lord Kael'Theron, your presence is required on Arkanni Prime immediately. Bring the child. This is not a request. His blood turned to ice. In 3 years, the Supreme Coordinator had left them alone. Mira had progressed through her training, had exceeded every expectation, had proven herself valuable and stable. Why summon them now? He found Elara in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. She took one look at his face and went pale. What happened? We've been summoned. All of us. To Arkanni Prime. No. They promised protection and training. They never promised we wouldn't be called to the homeworld. He pulled her close. But we've prepared for this. Mira is ready. She's strong enough to face whatever they throw at her. She's 10 years old. She's the most powerful 10-year-old in the Empire. Trust her, Elara. Trust what we've built. They told Mira together. The child listened with the same calm intensity she brought to everything now. 3 years of training, of being scrutinized and tested and pushed beyond normal limits, had forged her into something remarkable. When do we leave? She asked simply. Tomorrow. The Supreme Coordinator doesn't grant delays. Then I should practice my shielding. If we're going to the homeworld, there will be a lot of minds there. A lot of emotions. I need to be able to filter them. She spoke like a seasoned diplomat, not a child. It broke Kael'Theron's heart and filled him with pride in equal measure. The journey to Arkanni Prime took 4 days on the fastest Imperial courier. Mira spent the time in meditation, strengthening her mental defenses and preparing herself for whatever awaited. Kael'Theron drilled her on court protocol and political maneuvering, and Elara simply held her daughter when the fear became too much, reminding her that some things were more important than preparation. When Arkanni Prime appeared in the viewport, Mira pressed her face against the transparent aluminum and stared in wonder. It's beautiful, she whispered. The crystal cities are even more amazing than you described. They are. And you're about to walk through them as an honored guest. Kael'Theron placed a hand on her shoulder. Remember everything we've taught you. Stand straight, speak clearly, and never, ever apologize for existing. I won't. They docked at the primary diplomatic port to find an escort of honor guards waiting. Not the investigators who had come before, but ceremonial guards in gleaming armor. Whatever this summons was about, it was being treated as a formal occasion. The guard captain bowed to Kael'Theron. Lord Kael'Theron, the Supreme Coordinator awaits you in the Grand Assembly Hall. Your family is to accompany you. The Grand Assembly Hall, not the Council Chamber. The difference was significant. The Assembly Hall was where the Empire made proclamations, not judgments. They were led through corridors of crystal and light, through spaces so magnificent they seemed barely real. Mira walked between her parents, her head high, her luminescent temple patterns glowing softly. Arkanni citizens they passed stopped and stared, some with fascination, some with disapproval, all with undeniable interest. The hybrid child, walking through the heart of Arkanni Prime as if she belonged there. The Grand Assembly Hall was vast, its ceiling soaring hundreds of feet above the floor. Thousands of Arkanni filled the observation galleries, representatives from every world in the Empire. And at the far end, on a raised platform, sat the High Council. But they weren't alone. Dozens of other beings filled the hall. Humans from various colonies, other species from throughout Imperial space, and in a section off to one side, a group that made Kael'Theron's breath catch. Children. Hybrid children of various ages and species combinations. At least 20 of them, each with parents who looked as terrified and hopeful as he felt. Other hybrids, Mira breathed. There are others like me. When the Supreme Coordinator's voice echoed through the hall, amplified by acoustic technology and telepathic resonance. Citizens of the Empire, we are gathered today to address a matter of profound importance. 3 years ago, we were forced to confront an impossibility. A child born of 2 species we believed were genetically incompatible. We could have destroyed this impossibility. Many counseled us to do exactly that. Kael'Theron felt Elara's hand find his, her grip almost painful in its intensity. But we chose differently. We chose to study, to understand, to see if this impossibility could coexist with our laws and our society. Today I present to you the result of that choice. A gesture and a holographic projection filled the center of the hall. It showed Mira at various ages, demonstrating abilities that made the assembled crowd murmur in amazement. Telepathic precision that exceeded master trainers. Emotional reading so accurate it bordered on precognition. Learning capacity that allowed her to master complex subjects in weeks rather than years. This child, the Supreme Coordinator continued, has proven herself to be not a contamination, but an enhancement. Her hybrid nature has given her capabilities that exceed those of either parent species. And she is not alone. The projection shifted to show the other hybrid children. Different ages, different species combinations, but all demonstrating remarkable abilities. For centuries, we have enforced genetic purity laws based on the belief that mixing species would weaken us. We now have evidence that this belief was incorrect. These children represent not dilution, but synthesis, not weakness, but strength. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Kael'Theron could feel the emotional currents in the hall. Shock, anger, fascination, fear, all swirling in a chaotic storm. Therefore, the Supreme Coordinator said, and the hall fell silent. The High Council has voted to amend the genetic purity laws. Hybrid children born of genuine unions will no longer be considered illegal. They will be recognized as citizens of the Empire, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. The hall erupted. Some sections cheered. Others shouted in protest. The sound was deafening, but Mira was smiling. Not the careful, controlled expression she usually wore in public, but a genuine, radiant smile of relief and joy. The Supreme Coordinator raised a hand for silence. Eventually, order was restored. This is not a decision we make lightly, and it comes with conditions. All hybrid children will undergo assessment and training. Those who demonstrate stability and capability will be integrated into Imperial society. Those who prove dangerous or unstable will be contained for the safety of all. Less than perfect freedom, but more than Kael'Theron had dared hope for. But there is more. The child who began this change, Mira Chen of Colony 7, has been selected for a special honor. Kael'Theron tensed. Honors from the Empire were rarely simple gifts. Mira Chen, step forward. Mira looked up at her parents. Elara's eyes were filled with tears, but she nodded. Kael'Theron squeezed his daughter's shoulder gently. "You've got this," he whispered. Mira walked forward, her small figure somehow commanding attention in that vast space. She stopped before the council platform and bowed with perfect form. "Mira Chen," the Supreme Coordinator said, and now his voice was gentle. "You are 10 years old. You should be playing and learning and enjoying the simple pleasures of childhood. Instead, you have borne the weight of being a symbol, a test case, a living experiment. You have endured scrutiny and pressure that would break many adults, and through it all, you have remained kind, curious, and compassionate." Mira's composure wavered slightly. "The Empire owes you a debt. Therefore, I grant you this honor. When you come of age, you will be offered a position on the High Council itself, the first hybrid to hold such a position, the first human-descended being to shape imperial policy at the highest level." The hall erupted again, the protest louder this time. A hybrid on the High Council? It was unthinkable. It was revolutionary. "You have 7 years to prepare," the Supreme Coordinator continued, speaking directly to Mira now. 7 years to train, to learn, to become worthy of the responsibility. And then, if you choose to accept, you will help guide the Empire into a future where what you represent is not an exception, but a possibility for all. Mira's voice was small but clear. "What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? Then you fail with honor, and we try a different path. But child, I have watched your progress for 3 years. I have seen your strength, your intelligence, your remarkable heart. You will not fail. I'll try my best. That is all any of us can do." Mira bowed again and returned to her parents. Elara pulled her into a fierce embrace, tears streaming down her face. Kael'Theron wrapped his arms around both of them, his own eyes burning. They had done it. Against impossible odds, against an empire's worth of opposition, they had not only survived but created a path forward for all the impossible children who would come after. The assembly continued for hours. Other hybrid families were introduced. Plans for integration and training were outlined. Opposition voices were heard and documented. It was messy and contentious and historic. And through it all, Mira stood with her parents, a living symbol of the future they were building. That night, they were given quarters in the diplomatic complex, a suite of rooms that rivaled anything on Arkanni Prime for elegance and comfort. But Mira was restless, moving from window to window, staring out at the crystal cities. "What are you thinking?" Kael'Theron asked. "That it's strange. 3 years ago I was just a farm kid who had to hide what she was. Now I'm supposed to be on the High Council someday. How did that happen?" "You happened. You proved that being different could be extraordinary instead of wrong. But I'm still scared. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not smart enough or strong enough or—" "Mira," Elara sat beside her daughter on the window seat. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. That's always been enough. Mama, they're expecting so much. All those other hybrid kids, they're going to look at me and think I have all the answers. But I'm still figuring it out myself. Then figure it out together, Kael'Theron said. You don't have to carry this burden alone. You have us. You have Lady Synthara. You have Administrator Chen. And now you have those other families, other children who understand what you've been through. We're building a network, Elara added. A support system. Nobody expects you to change the Empire by yourself. Mira was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Can I tell you a secret? Always. I'm glad it's me. I'm glad I was the first. Because if it was someone else, they might have been scared into hiding. They might have let the Empire make them small. But I had you both. And you taught me that being impossible just means being first, not being wrong. Kael'Theron felt his throat tighten. When did you become so wise? I learned from the best. They sat together in the window, watching the lights of the crystal cities shimmer in the darkness. A human woman, an Arkanni diplomat, and their impossible daughter, looking out at a future they had helped create. The next day brought meetings and ceremonies, all building toward the official recognition ceremony, where hybrid children would be formally acknowledged as imperial citizens. Mira met the other hybrid children, and Kael'Theron watched as they gravitated toward her, seeking guidance and reassurance from someone who understood their unique challenges. One child in particular caught his attention, a young boy who appeared to be Arkanni Vexillian hybrid, his telepathic sensitivity so raw and uncontrolled that he radiated distress like a beacon. Mira noticed him too. Without being asked, she sat beside him and began teaching him the basics of the still point, her voice patient and kind. It's okay to be overwhelmed, she told him. I used to make all the electronics in my house go crazy when I got upset, but there are techniques that can help. Want me to show you? The boy nodded, desperate for any relief from the sensory overload he was experiencing. Kael'Theron watched his daughter teach another child the same techniques he had taught her 3 years ago. The circle was completing itself. Mira was already becoming what the Empire needed her to be. Not just a symbol, but a teacher, a guide, a bridge between old ways and new possibilities. Lady Synthara appeared at his elbow. She's remarkable. You know that, don't you? I've always known. The other families are already asking if she can work with their children. Word is spreading that she's not just powerful, but compassionate. That's a rare combination. She learned that from her mother. Perhaps, but she learned strength from you, and she's combined them into something neither of you could have achieved alone. Synthara paused. Kael'Theron, I want to propose something. A formal academy. A place where hybrid children can train together, learn from each other, develop their abilities in a supportive environment. And I want Mira to help design it. She's 10 years old. She's also the most qualified person in the Empire to understand what these children need. Her input would be invaluable. Kael'Theron looked at Mira, still patiently teaching the young boy how to find his mental anchor. Ask her yourself. She's the one who would have to do the work. Synthara approached Mira and made her proposal. The girl listened carefully, asked intelligent questions, and then said something that made the scientist smile. I'll help, but only if we can make it on Colony 7. I want it somewhere normal, not in the crystal cities where everyone will stare. Somewhere kids can be kids while they're learning to be more than kids. Colony 7 it is. The recognition ceremony took place in the Grand Assembly Hall once more. Each hybrid child was called forward, their names and lineages formally recorded in Imperial archives. Some children walked proudly. Some needed their parents to carry them. But all of them were acknowledged, accepted, given a place in a galaxy that had denied their very existence just years before. When Mira's name was called, she walked forward alone. She had asked to do so, saying it was important that people see her as strong and independent. She bowed to the High Council with perfect formality, accepted her citizenship credentials with grace, and spoke the oath of imperial service with a clear, steady voice. And when she turned to face the assembled crowd, Kael'Theron saw something that made his heart swell with pride. She wasn't nervous anymore. She wasn't performing. She was simply herself, confident, compassionate, and completely at home in her own impossible skin. The opposition voices in the crowd had quieted. It was hard to argue against the existence of hybrid children when you were watching them stand with such dignity and strength. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Arkanni nobles who had protested the law changes found themselves in conversations with hybrid children who asked intelligent questions and displayed remarkable abilities. Slowly, reluctantly, attitudes began to shift. Kael'Theron stood with Elara, watching it all unfold. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it, he corrected. You kept her safe all those years when I wasn't there. You raised her to be strong and kind despite all the reasons to be angry and afraid. This is your victory more than anyone's. Our victory. Mine, yours, Mira's, everyone who believed in her. Elara leaned against him. What happens now? Now we go home. Back to the farm, back to training and learning and growing. Mira has 7 years before she needs to decide about the council position. That's 7 years to be as normal as possible. Normal? I don't think we're ever going to manage normal. Then we'll settle for happy instead. As the reception wound down, Administrator Chen approached them. She had traveled to Arkanni Prime specifically for the ceremony, claiming it was important for colonial leadership to be represented at such a historic moment. Well, she said, my niece's daughter is now the most famous child in the Empire. Never thought I'd see that day. Neither did we, Elara admitted. You know what this means, don't you? Colony 7 is about to become extremely important. We're going to need infrastructure improvements, security upgrades, proper diplomatic facilities if we're housing the new hybrid academy. Chen smiled. I've already submitted proposals to the Imperial Development Council. With proper funding, we could transform the colony into something really special. Just don't transform it so much that it stops being home, Mira said, joining the conversation. She had escaped from a group of admirers and looked relieved to be back with her family. I'll do my best, though you're going to have to get used to visitors, scientists, politicians, other hybrid families. Your quiet farm life is probably over. That's okay. It was getting boring anyway. Mira grinned, and for a moment, she looked like exactly what she was, a 10-year-old girl with a mischievous sense of humor. The journey back to Colony 7 took another 4 days. This time, Mira spent less time in meditation and more time at the viewport, watching the stars pass by and talking about everything she wanted to do now that the threat of termination was no longer hanging over her. I want to help design the academy curriculum, and I want to learn about xenobiology so I understand my own genetics better, and I want to study diplomatic theory so I'm prepared if I decide to take the council position. And, she paused, and I want to learn to fly, not just in spaceships, but really fly, with wings or anti-grav or whatever works. That's quite a list, Kael'Theron said with amusement. I have 7 years. That's plenty of time. When Colony 7 appeared in the viewport, Mira pressed her face against the transparent aluminum just as she had when leaving. Home, she said simply. I thought the crystal cities were beautiful, but this is better. This is where I belong. The farmstead looked exactly as they had left it, but somehow different now. It was no longer just a hiding place. It was the foundation of something much larger, the birthplace of a revolution that would reshape the Empire. That first night back, after Mira had gone to bed exhausted but happy, Kael'Theron and Elara sat on the porch as they had so many times before. The amber sky was clear, the stars brilliant in their alien patterns. 7 cycles, Kael'Theron said. 7 cycles since I came back here, since I discovered her. It feels like a lifetime and a moment all at once. Best 7 cycles of my life, Elara replied. Hardest too, but definitely the best. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? The fear, the danger, the constant scrutiny? Not for a second. You? Not for a second. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the sounds of the farm settling for the night. Somewhere in the house, their impossible daughter was dreaming impossible dreams, preparing for an impossible future. And for the first time since returning to Colony 7 cycles ago, Kael'Theron felt something he had never quite managed before. Peace. Not the empty peace of absence, but the full peace of completion, of knowing he was exactly where he belonged, with exactly the people he belonged with, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The galaxy had changed, the Empire had changed, he had changed, and it had all started with a simple, impossible truth. Love did not recognize the boundaries that species drew between themselves. Elara had taught him that. Mira embodied it, and now, slowly but inevitably, the rest of the galaxy was learning it too. What are you thinking? Elara asked. That's 7 cycles ago. I came here looking for something I'd lost, and I found a future I never knew I wanted. Pretty philosophical for a diplomat. I learned from the best farmer in the sector. She laughed and took his hand. I love you, you ridiculous Arkanni. Even if you do talk like a fortune cookie sometimes. I love you too, both of you. More than I thought it was possible to love anything. Above them, the stars continued their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings below. But on one forgotten farm world, in one modest farmhouse, an impossible family had proven that the universe was larger and stranger and more wonderful than anyone had believed. And tomorrow, they would wake up and continue building a future where impossible things were simply things that hadn't happened yet, where hybrid children could dream of serving on the High Council, where diplomatic envoys could fall in love with farmers, where the boundaries between species were bridges instead of walls. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and struggles and moments of doubt, but they had already survived the impossible. Everything after that was just details. Inside the house, Mira stirred in her sleep. Her telepathic sense reached out unconsciously, finding both her parents on the porch, their emotional signatures calm and content. She smiled in her dreams and settled deeper into rest, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, protected, and exactly where she was meant to be. The impossible child. The bridge between worlds. The future they had all been afraid to imagine. And in the morning, when the amber sun rose over Colony 7, she would wake up and continue being exactly what she had always been. Mira Chen, daughter of a farmer and a diplomat, human and Arkanni, impossible and real, and absolutely, perfectly, defiantly herself. The end.